Hello, welcome to another live Google Hangout on the Living Income Guaranteed. And today we are going to be discussing an upcoming newly created movement, specifically, of course, about basic income, but we're talking about the Basic Income Women Action Group. And many people might say, well, what is the point of creating a group like this? How would it benefit women, not only in America, but around the world? And today we have, fortunately, two great ladies that are going to be sharing with us not only their experience in the basic income movement, but their joint effort to precisely create the BWAG, or the Basic Income Women Action Group, in North America, but not intended to remain there. They have the actual plan to make it an international movement, which I am very glad that we can all essentially be part of. And first, let me introduce them to you. Ann Withorn from Massachusetts, who has joined us in a previous Hangout. Hi, Ann. Great to have you again in a Hangout.
Hi.
And liane.gale, who is from Minnesota, and she is here with us originally from Germany, but living in Minnesota. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm living in Minnesota since 1999, so it's nearly longer where what I have lived before in Germany, so I feel really like Minnesotan, but I have my German roots. Yeah.
Great, and I need to correct, the name is Liane. Okay,
yeah.
So well, without further introduction, first of all, I would like to remind our viewers that there's going to be an open section for questions, comments in our Q&A section. For this, you have to be logged into your Google Plus account, because this is a Google Hangout. So for that, you have to be in your computer and place a question, and we will get it throughout the live discussion, and if there's time and it is appropriate to the topic, we will be able to share it with our panel. And also, please remember that if you're watching a YouTube video of this, meaning you're not watching it live, you can also place comments, questions, and we will let them know that there is questions for them. So I'd like to first begin with asking, how did this idea to create a women's action group representing basic income come from? How did it sprout, or when? Liane, if you would like to start.
Maybe I'll let Anne answer that question, because she has a longer history, within the basic income movement. So I think she comes from more like an historical context.
Okay, let's go forward with Anne.
Annie and I go back and forth. I keep wanting her to go first, and she keeps wanting me to go first. It's a classic women's dilemma, right? I have been involved in women's basic income stuff since 1970 through welfare rights, and then at that time the effort to create a guaranteed income. So I always understood that the idea of a guaranteed universal income coming out of this Martin Luther King and the whole welfare rights organization was a good idea. Right? It just made sense, and it was what people were pushing for then, and it just connected to me. And through the welfare rights stuff, I've always been thinking about basic income. I didn't know as much about the movement. I read a little stuff. This is before the days of the internet. So I read the stuff, and then I started to get connected. And in this country, basic income effort was pretty academic or professional. It wasn't bad. It just was not linking so much, I think, to certainly women's movements or welfare rights movements. It was sort of either out there talking. So as things have come forward and more people around the globe are organizing around basic income, it seemed like a good way for it to connect. And for me, the trigger was just 2 or 3 years ago when I heard about the notion of the precariat and the idea that there's a wider class than the poorest class. Because for me, again, historically, the problem was always that the working class Marxist roots about which I came were not able to link as much to women.
Liane, yes, can you share?
And then we actually met at the 2015 NABIG conference in New York City, and it it was like immediately clear to me, and that was my entrance into connecting with people in the basic income movements. I'm very fresh, actually, since February only. But it became immediately clear stepping in the room. It was majority men, and it's kind of really the focus of many of the discussion was kind of towards male, what males kind of thought about, you know, basic income. So there was kind of like not very much, you know, a women's perspective of basic income. So on March 1st, when we had our first meeting towards building movements in the United States, the call for a women group was very strong there. So we kind of just took it on from there and started preparing a statement on that. But we only try to do like some minimal organization because we want to have many women kind of building this group. So we kind of didn't try to get it to a state where it's already formed. We kind of just want to provide a forum for women to join together to discuss and develop this group.
I also noticed that when watching those conferences, because they were, of course, broadcasted live, and that's how I came to know also Anne, because I saw that there were quite a few women only there, and the room was mostly filled with men. And this is mostly about bringing up the subject of what is going on with the fact that women are not as much represented there. Why aren't women being part of this? And you know, why is it that, of course, throughout the whole history of man, there has been mostly like a the majority of males are the ones that are taking part in politics. So I'd like to ask both of you, what motivates you then to create this action group for women to be part of basic income, not only in America but also at an international level?
Shall I go first now?
Yeah, Nick, go for it.
So I used to be a scientist, lifelong scientist, very focused on my career, and then 4 years ago I just became an activist. I am not longer a scientist, and I'm just kind of trying to find a way forward. I mean, we all know about the destruction of the planet and the inequality globally, and I've been wading through activism since then, and I came naturally. I mean, it's kind of part of my 4-year evolution in activism. I come very naturally to basic income because I think it's a wonderful first step towards dismantling the whole capitalistic and patriarchic system. So, and it's kind of also, it feels very natural to me to combine it with feminism, because we are not really represented very well in the market economy. It was built by men for men, and women just have to kind of fit in, even though our needs are not being considered at all. I mean, the United States doesn't even have maternity leave. I mean, what is that? And so, I mean, for me, it's kind of like I want to be part of, you know, the revolution. And I think basic income and women, I think, just kind of hits the nail on its head. So, yeah.
I want to say that the basic income folks are they're the kind of the mildest form of male-dominated movement organizations. In my experience, they're nicer. They don't ever get in your way. They really do understand, theoretically and personally, really, they understand that the women's issue is key. I mean, not only women half the world, but even more of the unpaid, unrecognized work of the world is done by women. And so the best of them, and most of them, in my experience that I've known, get it intellectually. And the organization got started out of a group of men who were philosophers, economists, social theorists, again, and they just kept finding their own. It's a classic story with academia of men finding men, and there being fewer ways for women to think about themselves in it, even though, you know, there's worse situations. And I think we just have to, as women, that's why the first thing I want to do, sometimes I just want to start out by blasting the men for not doing anything right. In this kind of movement, I think it's really up to the women who are seeing it to really do the kind of organizing that we're talking about. consciously reach out to women, not only women academics, but to women who are involved in the world which needs a basic income for themselves. Women who've been on welfare, low-income women, people who've been work as pensioners, people who are trying to work as part-timers because that's the only way they can do it. I mean, the whole set of the work population that's women who need a basic income need to get involved in this movement. And so far, it's been more heady and about the thoughts and the ideas and the plans. And that's why we wanted to name it an action group. That's why we wanted to start out in various ways relating to grassroots women. In my case, welfare rights activists, but in other cases, people who were doing other things around women. To just bring them in as activist women, as opposed to go to the academic conferences and find the women who were there.
I consider that it is here then important for you guys to share more about the main goals within it. And you're mentioning that this is not meant to be like an academia type of reunions, but more like the word action being emphasized within it. Can you share then a little bit more about some of the main goals within it? Liane?
I have to say that Liane is as important as me in this whole way of thinking about it, because if there's anything she's kept saying, I don't see the action here. From the first time I met her, where's the action? Remember? What? Why were we just sitting around? I love her.
So it was
met her too in February. But
yeah, so it was 3 women, Anne and myself and my friend Christine Osbakken, who is running right now for city council in Duluth. So she's kind of like dropped off a little bit for right now. But after the movement meeting in Brooklyn on March 1st, the 3 of us worked together on a statement which we released on April 28th, and we had like 3 different parts to it, as kind of like the goals and the justification, and then also we kind of went to the action items. And what you're asking about, what we want to do, I mean, action items, or is that the question? So it's kind of to get established relationship with basic income women and also men who are sympathetic to women's issue. I think that is kind of, there's a definite we kind of see a lot of basic income men very prominent, you know, in the general community, but there's just kind of a lack of presence of women. So I think the first step is like kind of coming together, getting to know each other, and also where we're coming from. And it seems to be very interesting. The women who have shown interest, they're not just doing basic income. They're always kind of part of another group, you know, like for rape victims or from welfare caregiving was kind of, you know, so it's kind of, we have an opportunity here to weave a very rich community of women who are really want to make a better world, not just kind of like dreaming or so, but really kind of working on it and making it. So just the value of these connections is really priceless. And also then, because we already have connection then to different activist group, we can, another idea would be to, you know, establish relationships not just with individual women, but with groups that, you know, work for the common good, social justice groups, environmental groups, all kinds of groups, and then, you know, kind of educate them about the concept of basic income, because in the United States, compared to, you know, what the movement has achieved already in Europe, in the United States, nobody knows about the concept of basic income. But so I've been tabling. I'm also doing a regional group here in Minnesota, and we have been tabling, you know, the summer, and it's just kind of, it's really important just to talk to people about what basic income is, and because it's kind of a realistic concept, you know, and just kind of trying to get the groups to embrace basic income, and then maybe as a larger community we can really start having a political push in that direction, you know. So kind of really community building is something very, very good. And we also, I think we shouldn't shy away. One of the stated action items is actually garner support from political office holders or candidates for office. So I mean, we really want to kind of put it in, or get it into the political realm. You know, we are not kind of just kind of doing a 501c3, kind of trying to to talk about it, but I really kind of want to move politics in that direction.
And also empower women to realize that we can be part of it, because there is not enough women representing not only women's issues, but the sheer fact that we think differently, that we had like a different conception also of life in itself. There are many aspects that do tend to influence the way that we see how political structures, the organization in itself of political parties, can also be benefited quite a lot from the way that women tend to get to agreements and kind of get the egos out of the place, because when it's only men, it's like a very, you know, a one side view of the world, the coin, so to speak. And I mean, we are both men and women living in this world, so we need equal representation, which I would consider that this is what it's all about. And Anne, would you like to share something?
One of the sort of tensions within the women's movement over the 30 plus years I've been involved, and in the welfare rights movement and in all this stuff, has been how to present women's demands for full equality, with not only as demands for jobs and demands for political power, both of which were obviously important, but to also demand in the name of women control of your life, you know, autonomy, respect for what you do that is not in the paid workforce, but not going back in an essentialist way, to we're all mothers, and to the, and most of us are, it's a great thing to be able to be a mother, but to not to sort of retreat from the fray into a kind of traditional sort of essentialist notion of the feminine, of the women's power as sort of like organic, earth-like, not have anything to do with struggle. And there's been that tension that I've experienced over the years. You go as welfare rights folks and as low-income advocates to now conferences back in the 80s and 70s, you know, you'd be trying to talk about welfare rights, and they'd say, well, here's the jobs programs, or here's the jobs training programs, or here's getting you into higher education. People would say, that's not what I need now. I need to be able to support myself in my life. And up until very recently, if not still true, it was hard for women who were demanding that to demand anything other than categorical benefits and support, you know, welfare, social, you know, certain sort of extension of individual categorical benefits. And what I think is essential to building a movement of women around basic income is that we say everybody needs a social benefit. Everybody needs a basic income, and women especially need it because of the roles that we often are assigned but also choose to take, which make the, you know, depending on labor, depending on a job, more problematic for us. And I think I'm hearing more respect for that opinion, not disrespect before, but just more, because the economy has changed so much. I mean, people aren't in, it's hard to be in an industry you can organize. So the union folks, it's just harder to connect. It's harder for women who are doing things simply as women to sort of get their voice unless they talk about the floor underneath us all. And I think that's the big opportunity for women, and that's what we can bring to the movement, because we more likely understand that it's not about any job being a good job. It's not about dressing for success. It's not about Hillary Clinton being president or not. It's about how do we feel able with the floor underneath us to participate.
Liane?
I just want to add, you know, again, I think I've made that point before. The whole economic system and the political system are systems designed by men for men, and it's just women are being forced to kind of play, you know, a part in this male system with the basic income. We can really just relax and then figure out what we are about, you know, and then we can really kind of try to strive for true equality, you know, because what does it mean, true equality? What Anne was kind of like mentioning also, you know, just kind of being paid the same, you know, maybe women or maybe nobody should kind of have to work 40 hours a week, you know, in a job most of us don't like, you know, and I think there's kind of a lot of creativity is kind of being buried under this preconceived notions that everybody needs to have a job, you know. It's yeah.
It's beyond that, really. It is guaranteeing a human right and an empowerment that it is long overdue to be granted to every individual human being. And a little bit going back to the concept of women being underrepresented in politics, and if we got the witch hunting, which was done to women in Europe, that precisely were demanding this kind of social equality and some fairness to women, and they were simply shut off through that kind of situation, which is just commonly known as witch hunting. But in fact, it was women that were demanding what is now commonly known as just basic human rights and the right to have their dignified living, which is what we all stand for here. And I would like to then also, well, Liane, if you would like to share a little bit more about the political participation of women, of course, and your own experience within this, because sometimes, as Anne was mentioning, we kind of tend to cage ourselves in the very feminine aspect and just believing that our role is only in defined activities. So what has been your own experience and motivation to be part of, in your case, the Green Party in Minnesota?
Yeah, again, in my journey to kind of find a way personally forward in activism and trying to be in a place where we can really affect change, I came through the Green Party, and I was actually, for a short time, I was actually the co-chair of the Green Party here in Minnesota, and compared to Europe, we're kind of a very, very small party, but I kind of learned then at the end I really didn't like this partisanship either, because it again creates artificial distinction between people. I did not know how to relate to people from the Democratic Party, you know, and I think we need to kind of move beyond this artificial barriers we kind of impose on each other. I mean, I believe in a global government, because we need to kind of you know, start organizing in a global fashion if we want to kind of save ourselves from environmental destruction and you know, and even further misery, you know. So the current political system, it really I see some benefits, you know. I see what Bernie Sanders is kind of doing in the conversation here in this country, and but it's not enough. I don't think through the political arena we can achieve much, except for disruption. You know, I mean, it would be kind of great to have, say, like a women's party, and just, you know, what is kind of nice. I was a political advisor for Chris Osbergen, who kind of was a co-author of the statement. She ran for representative, you know, in the state, and I was her political advisor. The nice thing is running for office is that people actually listen to you, you know. So that is kind of like what I really like about politics, because people start listening to what you have to say. So I find value of that, but I don't trust the political system, the current political system, that we actually can move fast enough, considering the problems we are facing. I think it's just too slow. I've been spending 2 years at the legislature in the Capitol, you know, and it's just, you know, like a 1 step forward, 2 step back, and then another kind of the other party comes into you know, government and dismantles everything. It's just kind of really piddly, you know. We have to think really big, you know. And so for me, basic income is kind of like, you know, kind of making a very big step towards a better future. So, and I really hope that you know, that we can talk to some candidates or political parties, and they're kind of bringing that in the political realm again for education of people. You know, if candidates have that on the platform, then people think about it and then hopefully realize that this is kind of a realistic way forward.
Anne, go ahead.
I think that women in the basic income movement have a potential and almost an obligation to ourselves to be really radical in our ideas. You know, we need to be the ones to say, what is this about any job being a good job, or everybody wanting employment? What's so good about these jobs? What's so good about this definition of employment? What's wrong with mixing your life up between loving, caregiving, creativity, all those things? You've got it wrong, guys. You've got it wrong about what life is. And I feel that, in fact, on the other side of my sense that it's not essential, I think women are much more able to see life as more than a job. And I think if we can braven ourselves up to just say that, and not when somebody asks, well, how will this help women get a job? If I've talked one time, I've talked 100 times over the years, when you're trying to talk about women's poverty and immediately somebody says, well, what about job training programs? Or what about education? Isn't the goal to get every woman to be able to get a good job? And I say, well, it may not even be to get a job. You know, and that cracks the conversation, because people, men and many women, can't quite go there. They think you're saying, well, should you have just be home? No. There's lots of things to do. And we're both parents, and we know the joy and the tiredness of working with our family, but it feels like we're the ones who can say more things that are than the usual stuff about politics, about what it means. What makes me so sad with Hillary as running as the first woman, and I don't know what I think of her, I'm not a fan, is that she can't break out. She's now learned to say she's a grandmother. Well, that's nice. And she's now learned to talk about her mother, but you don't feel it. You don't feel her understanding of frustration with all the ways in which women are defined. It's not a pigeonhole, because it's half the society, but it still feels like it's not enough to be able to talk about all the things you need to talk about. I mean, who cares about her hair? For a while there was so much talk about her hair, her pantsuits, and all this kind of crap that doesn't affect men. Now, I think she should run for office, and I don't care what kind of haircut she has. And I think we have to find all these ways, and we can if we just stop trying to please. And that's the essence of being a feminist. You can't please very many people and be a feminist. And you certainly won't please lots of people with basic income unless you create a way of understanding it that says, oh, I thought that was a wacky idea, but maybe it really would work.
Yeah, exactly. And this is something that, of course, women, as it was said before, by just making it part of the conversation and realizing, hey, we can actually represent it and get together and have that more sense of relationships, which is also something that is more maybe natural to women, to approach it from this very commonsensical perspective instead of just making it like a policy that is just very narrow-minded, such as, yeah, let's give everyone jobs, but it goes beyond that. And I consider that this is very necessary in politics and also in society in general. We've been very programmed to kind of be narrow-minded in how economics should work, and we have a lot of potential of the kind of principles and ways of and perspectives that we can integrate into our society just by having more participation as women, of course. We have a question from Joanna Jesus, and she's saying, hi all, thanks for setting up this plan to action and for sharing. What has been the resistances you have seen both from women and males within your networks in relation to basic income? What has been the proposed solutions to respond to those arguments?
Yanni, do you want to go first?
Yes, I mean, the resistance, it's always kind of coming more from men. Again, it's just the basic income. How do you implement it, and how is it getting paid for, and how much it should be? So it seems, you know, like from a male perspective, it seems to be very important. These questions seem to be kind of very important, where I think from a female standpoint, it's just kind of, I'm sure somebody can figure it out. I mean, they send you know, rockets to the moon and beyond, and I mean, so we can figure those kind of things out. But I think from a male perspective, it's kind of like, that's kind of really very, very central to them. So that's also why I think maybe a women's perspective is kind of you know, necessary, because you know, we're kind of not really honing in on numbers and facts and kind of trying to formulate the basic income movement in those kind of limitations, I think, you know. So, but otherwise, I mean, I have only had very good responses. Otherwise, I think everybody just, once they kind of get it, everybody thinks it's a great idea, and that is just kind of wonderful to, you know, when you're kind of out tabling us all, it's kind of they're really wonderful conversations. I'm spent like 10-15 minutes talking to one person. It goes very often into their personal lives, and you kind of really can have a personal connection with the people you're talking to. And it's so different than when you kind of table, against a mine being built or something. It's kind of like very short. People don't connect with that issue at a personal level, and so it's not as gratifying as talking about basic income. I really like it's kind of so soulful. Yeah.
I think
totally agree on that. Yeah. Anne?
I agree totally with what she says, and I think that when you start talking basic income to anybody, if you've got 3 minutes, if you've got an elevator time conversation, I guess, in the trade, if you could get people considering, wow, what would it mean for me? What would it mean for my daughter? What would it mean for my children? What would it mean for my mother? I mean, if I don't have to figure out how to get there, but as a concept, as a way of restructuring how we think about what life is, you can get people talking about that. You can get people thinking, wow, I could, if you're really poor, you'd have you'd have access to resources without having to go with your budgets in hand and figure out if you made too much income next week, they take it away. I mean, there's that. If you are bottom, middle class, lower, I don't know the term, but it just gives you a way to think about, well, could I go back to school and not have to be, what could I do with my life if I had a trust fund, if I had a basic amount of money there? Mm-hmm. The opposition that I've faced the most from the communities that I'm most connected to are, wait a minute, this can't be universal and really take care of poor people. They are worried that it will be one of those schemes that will get watered down so much that it'll just be not enough money to really help poor people, but the liberals will think, oh, if it got it's like the earned income tax credit. It's not enough to do anything really about poverty, even though it's not a bad idea. It makes and I think people worry. I just was at a conference where this woman was saying, I don't want Donald Trump to get a basic income. I said, well, what tax it back? She says, why should he even think about getting it? And I do understand that. Let me just say one other thing, which is that the other side, which is the labor people particularly, worry about a basic income as an idea because they think it will make it harder to organize for worker-related issues. And those in the public sector that'll somehow there be used, which it could be, to cut public services, and that's jobs.
Liane?
So, and another thing that, people always then assume that people are becoming lazy. That is kind of, I had some very violent reaction from some people, especially very hardworking people who have really difficulties making their life. It's kind of like, but that would kind of just encourage laziness or something, and I'm always kind of trying to come from a human evolutionary standpoint, I mean, the idea of jobs is very recent in human history, and people always knew what to do with their time, and nobody wants to kind of just sit down and do nothing. People like to be productive. They want to be part of a community. People like to work. They get really great pleasure. It's just with a basic income, it would be kind of like a self-determined way of living instead of being determined by somebody, by your boss or by society or something like that. But there's kind of really a resistance or something to kind of, people think it will encourage laziness, and they don't want other people to be lazy. They want them to work, or I don't know, it's sometimes very strange, especially with very hardworking people. They don't want other people to have their freedom or something. I don't know.
Well, that's
also like very much part from the programming, so to speak, that if you don't work, then you don't have money. Therefore, you need to work to be on the same side of me, that I am also doing hard work and earning. Why should you get the money if you're not doing anything? So there's like a spitefulness also that exists also at an emotional level, I would say, and that has to be sorted out individually and be willing to give to another unconditionally. Anne?
I just think it's really important when you talk about the opposition to low basic income and to historically to welfare, is to see how deeply rooted it is in misogyny and racism. People who, a lot of people, even women, think are not really working and not really going to do it responsibly, are women, because obviously they're taking home and having this great time taking care of their children, or if they're getting welfare, they're on reading bonbons. There's all this kind of fear of that and hatred for the idea that people, especially women, will get something that isn't quote unquote earned. And in this country, at least, I don't know how it works in the rest of the world, but the racism piece about making people, quote, work harder, have tougher requirements, have everything harder, is so deep in the notion that that's the racial order. Men, African Americans especially, and immigrants, especially darker skinned immigrants, have to be working really hard for us to count them as seriously working. Whereas we can go, middle class white people, other classes of white people can go and count a lot of the things that they do as work. And as long as we haven't directly confronted that as a basic income movement, as a women in basic income movement, we're going to keep failing. We're not going to keep failing, but we're going to fail because we aren't challenging that, saying, why do you think people aren't working? You know, what are you afraid of? Wouldn't you do better?
Liane?
Can I just add something? I just started to read a book by Riane Eisler, The Real Wealth of Nation, which was published in 2007, and she kind of said that in economic consideration, work of women, household work is not even considered work, or unpaid voluntary work is not being considered, you know, having any value, because it's not really remunerated with money. So it's kind of a limited view of what economy is really about. And I think we really have to redefine what economy means. Household economy, and then also the natural economy, what nature is giving us. Those are basic parts of the economy, and they're not in any books. I just got like a fact yesterday from that book, and 2004 Switzerland determined that the value of unpaid work was $190 billion, mainly, you know, provided by women, and that is equivalent to 70% of the Swiss GDP, you know. So the economy is so twisted against women nowadays. It's just awful. And I think, you know, coming from a basic income, I think it's not an utopian idea. I think we should kind of present it as that we have a right to that money. If money is needed to make a living, you know, I mean, women have really a right to be compensated, and I think we have to talk this language now, you know. I mean, it's just not, we cannot go on kind of just having the market economy on the shoulders of mainly women, you know, and women are really so devalued in this current system. It's just very discouraging.
Also, one of the main proponents, Guy Standing, has done most of his work also in India. He has like this new book coming out, and he shared some of the most valuable examples is the changes precisely that came to women in India when they started getting a basic income and the emancipation that came with it. So I would also suggest to our viewers to check those conversations out and to realize that, as Anne was saying, the men also being part of the basic income movement are quite well, you know, focusing on women's issues, and that is absolutely great to see. We have other questions, so let's get to them. From Jean Kenny, she's saying, what are the best ways that we can decouple the basic income movement from partisan politics, be heard and taken seriously?
Yeah.
You want to go, Anne?
She's done partisan politics some. I've actually avoided the whole. I couldn't even do a Green Party candidacy, and I just sort of feel like that if you don't talk ideas and get people together in social movements, not for the sake of doing party politics, you're going to get so twisted up. But I know that's wrong, in the sense that there are important ways to enter. I just have never found one personally.
So what is so nice about basic income, you can come to basic income from all kinds of different directions. You know, it's just wonderful. I just love talking about basic income, and I think independent of your political affiliation, you can argue with politicians about basic income. You know, you can just kind of like just use a little bit different phrasing or something. But I think it should be, you know, supported by everybody. And I think that's kind of, again, what we have mentioned before. It's a very nice unifying principle, and that is kind of maybe like a first step towards, you know, like more a non-partisan approach to politics, you know.
Well, and
yeah, for sure, go for it.
I think there's also the right, which is not the mean, racist, murderous right, but the people who worried about certain kinds of responsible government and all this stuff, and who hate public and any other kind of bureaucracies. I mean, they just hate it. It's the kind of populism that says everybody should be, but it's hates government. You know, you can get the government out of my Medicare. And I feel like that basic income has a potential, if we frame it right and then as much as possible do it right, as being a way to keep the notion of public dispersion of goods, having some sense of public redistribution and accountability without the just dehumanizing facts of these bureaucracies, where you're supposed to get something and you spend so much of your time hating the process of getting it, having to be dehumanized, demoralized by the process, that you start to say, fuck it, I don't want any of it. And I think at its best, the simplicity, the elegant simplicity of basic income, which is everybody is deserving of it because they are living, takes away a lot of the potential for all those categorical programs. It doesn't end everything, but I think it's another way to talk to some of the more conservative politicians. And I think when they say it'll cost too much, you say, well, I'm not so sure it will. There's plenty of evidence that it doesn't. We can work on that, but we've got to have it. And if we've got to have it, then we figure out how to make it affordable.
I would agree. Yeah, go for it.
Can I just add something? I think also if we have a basic income implemented, I think that will be the end of the current economic system, capitalism, and it will be the end of politics as we know it too. So I think it's just such a game changer, you know. So I don't think we can really predict where it's going then in the future. But I think it will be so disruptive to the system that obviously are not working, you know, that we then have time to really sit down and, you know, kind of start from scratch. What would be a good economic system that benefits all people and the environment too, you know, and what kind of political system do we need to actually have, you know, can we, because if everybody would get a basic income, people are more empowered and they can make much more decisions by themselves or in smaller groups. We don't need then a big government anymore to take care of certain things, so we can really shrink, you know, like this big national or international governments to a minimum, you know, so and empower people. So I think it would just kind of change the political landscape completely.
I agree on that. Yeah.
I agree that it could. I also think that it wouldn't necessarily do that. It is not itself a vehicle for doing all of that. What it is a step which, if we can get it implemented, will just crack a lot of foundations of what people think is basic human nature. It's basically the way the economy works, and it'll give people a chance to say, I think that, in fact, we want, not just that we'll still need, we want government. We want public services. We don't want privatized everything. We don't want everything. We want to say there's somebody who's responsible for building the roads and for overseeing schools and setting standards for healthcare. And I worry that we will be so hopeful about the potential of basic income to give people some floor that we'll forget that the other floor we need is a better healthcare system for all and an absolute guarantee of a decent education system for all. And that's public services, but it's not categorical anymore. It's for everybody, and we come back to those notions that have gotten forgotten, especially in this country. So I would love if basic income was the end of capitalism. If somebody could come away to talk about market economies that include basic income and all the other things that are not capitalist exchange markets and still call it capitalist world, I don't really care, even though I'd like to see them do it. You know, I think you have to socialize more. I think that the tradition of U.S. populism, though, is one to really look at. It's got a bad history with racism. But it also says, hey, let's let the people decide. Let's let people in on this and then give them an honest way.
I will consider that politics will be transformed as more people like ourselves, just regular people that see the common sense of this basic principle, basic income, as Anne was saying, very elegant, simple manner of advocating for basic human rights, can have that potential of transforming the political landscape, and that is something that I would place as a proposal as well. Basic income parties, which are also already ongoing in Europe. We have other questions, so let's move on, and comments. This is from Joku, and he's saying, it is interesting. I do get this sense that the hard-working people tend to have a blind spot when it comes to basic income. It is as though the bitterness and alienation that comes from hard work becomes internalized and closes them from being open. This was a comment on what we were discussing on the provision of a basic income and how people have these resistances and justifications as to why they should not be entitled to it unconditionally. Any comments?
That is really, I mean, kind of nearly tears kind of came to my eyes, you know, kind of listening to this comment, you know. I mean, this current economic system is just creating havoc with people. It's, you know, we're so very isolated from each other, you know. Humans, they're kind of like social animals, you know, and what capitalism is doing, the current system is doing, is kind of just make us, you know, warriors, just kind of being concerned about our own well-being and maybe our immediate family, but we don't, I mean, it's really killing our sense of compassion. I just actually recently saw a graph, and they kind of looked at compassion among young people, and it's on a downward slope, you know, and that is kind of really, really very, very sad to me, you know, that it's even with our young people seeing all the destruction and the dysfunction, but everybody is a victim of this system, and it really, really makes me very sad.
That's why the precariat notion is really important. Because if we're scared all the time, and there's more reason for more people to be scared because the capitalist economy doesn't work for them anymore, then we've got the fear, and once fear is driving us, it's terrible. I mean, just bad for everybody. I have great experience talking about basic income with young buses and parks and lesson classes and whatever. Just saying, well, stop your doubts for a minute. Just imagine what it would mean for you, people you love, to just have a basic income. Why does somebody else also get in the way of that, maybe? But the first thing is, what would you do with it? Imagine yourself not constrained by this fear of desperate poverty if you don't have this job. What would you do? And if you can get that conversation to happen even for a minute, somebody will say, wow, I could do something else.
Exactly. It's giving to everyone the power of choosing the life that they want for themselves as a human right, not as any kind of ideology only. Thanks, Joe, for your comment. We have some other last two comments. We are almost at the end of Hangout, so I will just read them. From Joanna Jesus in response to her question. Thank you. I agree. Where there is a will, there's way. So for women, instead of playing the game set by men, e.g. the trend to become CEOs like men, we are going to reshape and inspire the new rules of the game, and men are welcome to join.
Thumbs up.
Good for her, that's right.
I guess we all agree here. And then Jean Kenny is also saying, yes, thank you, and I agree, this is a human rights issue, when she was talking about decoupling basic income from bipartisan or partisan politics. In the US, it's bipartisan almost. So we have a few minutes left, and I would like you to share just this step forward to the action group, and we will be leaving links, pertinent links, so that you can contact either Anne or Liane if you want to be a part of. But can you share a little bit more of what is to come for it?
Yanni?
Could you repeat? I don't quite get it. We have right now a Facebook group, so if you want to kind of get involved right now, that is kind of like maybe the easiest way. We're also looking for women who are wanting to actively shaping this effort to together. If you're welcome to follow. Right now the Facebook group is a closed group, but if you send a request, you can we're kind of having everybody join. It's just under construction, so we didn't want to kind of have it all in public right now. But I mean, we're really looking for women who are kind of getting actively involved in this effort. And as we have said before, we just kind of provided, the initial step. We didn't want to kind of bring this effort forward, just kind of like the two of us or the three of us, because we want to have input from many, many, many different women. Men are also welcome, and just kind of building something together. And I think also my experience during the last 4 years in the activist world, there's a lot of dysfunction even between members in some groups, and I think especially women have to kind of learn. I was reading a book recently, Phyllis Chesler, Women's Inhumanity to Women. I think we're kind of like, part of the system is making us into dysfunctional women too, so it's kind of, I think we have a lot of work to do just to kind of how we best interact with each other and lifting ourselves up. I'm being in a scientific world, I kind of used to be kind of more around men anyways, but I kind of really feel that women, and so I may be a little bit off, but I really feel that women need to kind of learn how do we kind of lift each other up and support each other, and also kind of how can we build power together, and how does that power look like? I mean, it will not kind of look like male power or whatever power structure that is, but I think it's just also going really deep into ourselves and develop ourselves as human beings and real women. I think it's even not, to me, it's not even clear what it kind of means to be a woman, because we're so confused by kind of the world around you and the expectations and also by patriarchy. So I think there's kind of it's a lot of self-finding too.
I also think that just to be clear, we weren't calling for all the women in the basic income world to only become people who are doing women's stuff. I mean, women in basic income, this group could be the only way. Our assumption is that the basic income idea is broader. It's broader, and it needs the conception of women and then inclusion. So I think our assumption is that any woman who is already intrigued by or wants to be intrigued by the concept of basic income, to get involved in basic income, we certainly are providing all sorts of connections to those existing organizations and things. What we're trying to say is that simultaneously we're looking to link a particular understanding of what it means to be a woman within that movement, and building a woman's consciousness and voice within that movement, and sometimes being separate from, having our own meetings and our own things. But there's so much work to be done.
Yeah. So both of us, Anne and me, we're kind of very active in regional, basic income movements too. We're here in Minnesota, we have Basic Income Guarantee Minnesota. So the women's group is not kind of the only thing we're kind of doing. And then we have this new nonprofit organization, Basic Income Action. And, so there's kind of a lot of, I really love the basic income community. There's so much happening now, So, but I think the basic, idea was kind of to have the women's voices elevated, and becoming relevant in the movement, because there was a real void before.
I absolutely agree with that, and let those be the last words of the Hangout, unless you want to add anything else.
I would like you to speak as a younger generation woman about what you think about this from a woman's perspective.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that we have been underrepresented, and it is true that not many women dare to stand up, because sometimes we leave these to men to take care of. Fascinatingly enough, as part of our movement, the main document was written by women. In fact, all 4 people were women, and myself leading these Hangouts, I am a woman. So we are kind of creating a new trend of inviting more women, and we have a lot of people that are into politics around the globe, in diplomacy. So we've made hangouts with them, and we are proudly also supporting and contributing to this growing voice of women, and regardless of the age, I would say, and nationality. I'm in Mexico, for example, and not only basic income should be a North American movement, it is an international movement, and this is something that we should all encourage people from many other activist movements to come together and support this one vote for basic human rights, basic living income. So thank you very much for your conversation, for your input and experience. And I would like to also invite the viewer, if you have any further questions, comments, place it in the comment section of the YouTube video, and we will see you next time. Thank you, Liane and Anne.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
See you next time. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.